Welcome back, Metroid Prime fans, for another new informational video and huge discussion video from the light that has been discovered from the darkness of Metroid Prime 4. The darkness has indeed shined light on new information that we can discuss regarding Metroid Prime 4 and its timeline and its story in this video. So if you do enjoy this, please hit the like button and we will get started right away, because this is very interesting information. Throughout 2020 and 2021, myself and my colleagues Rob from Rule 2 Review and Joey Ferris from Game Explain have been discussing at length in podcasts about Metroid Prime 4 and the Metroid Prime series and Metroid in general, Metroid Dread as well. But we discuss the timeline of when Metroid Prime 4 could in fact be taking place. In fact, theorizing that Metroid Prime 4 could actually be taking place after the events of Metroid Dread, because as we discussed at that time, Metroid Prime 3 ended the story arc of the Phazon and then continued on with Metroid Prime Federation Force. So with Metroid Prime 4, we discussed the possibility that the timeline could in fact be somewhere completely different in the Metroid Prime series and the Metroid saga from the regular games. However, new light has been shed and confirmed as to when exactly the Metroid Prime 4 timeline will take place, and this is from a new interview from the producer of Metroid Dread, Yoshio Sakamoto, at E3 2021, and many people may have missed this fact during this interview with Eurogamer because everything was so focused on Metroid Dread. However, it was very clear a follow-up was made and clarified about the time range of when the Metroid Prime series takes place, which in fact would include Metroid Prime 4 in this. So Yoshio Sakamoto confirmed that the Metroid Prime series does still in fact take place in between Metroid 1 and Metroid 2 Samus Returns. So even though it's been many years since this was talked about, it has been reconfirmed, and this is something very important to consider when talking about the story of Metroid Prime 4, because this opens up a very large possibility of where this Metroid Prime 4 and possibly this new trilogy of games, Metroid Prime 5, Metroid Prime 6, could in fact be dealing with in its story. I do believe now that the Metroid Prime 4, 5, and 6 trilogy will at least at first heavily involve Sylux and Metroids in a large way. But I also think, at least in Metroid Prime 4, there could very well be some Chozo influence, or in fact maybe even Samus talking to a Chozo or talking to some sort of image of a Chozo. Now, digging very deep into the lore of Metroid Prime and the entire Metroid series is extremely multifaceted. Many fans may not be aware, but before the first Metroid game even started, there is an entire backstory of Samus Aran, how she grew up with the Chozo, how she was raised, how she joined the Galactic Federation, how things went south during some of the missions there, and she actually had some communications with Chozo and of course her team during that time before she had to leave and become a bounty hunter. Now for Metroid Prime 4, it's been hinted at since Metroid Prime Hunters, which takes place after Metroid Prime 1 and right before the events of Metroid Prime 2, that Sylux, a bounty hunter who has a very distinct hatred for the Galactic Federation and a hatred for Samus, is in fact introduced in that game. And during that game, when a group of bounty hunters, including Samus Aran, who was sent by the Galactic Federation to investigate this now extinct alien race's area of the galaxy known as the Limbic Cluster, to find the secret of this ultimate power that resides in that cluster. Now during that entire game, Metroid Prime Hunters, all the different bounty hunters are fighting Samus, and at the very end, Sylux escapes in his ship, not to be seen again until the end of Metroid Prime 3, when during the secret ending, a ship follows Samus, and that ship was confirmed to be of Sylux. Then in Metroid Prime Federation Force, which takes place after the events of Metroid Prime 3, the secret ending in that game shows Sylux going and breaking into a Federation Force research station and then going and hatching a Metroid egg that one of the generals asked the Federation Force to keep for study. And the events that happen after that are unknown. However, there are some key connections to consider when thinking about where it goes from here to Metroid Prime 4, and namely Sylux's background and what happens to spark Metroid 2 Samus Returns to even happen. So first of all, with Sylux, there is some very interesting theories out there as to what Sylux is and where he comes from and what his motivation is to be such a hated adversary of the Galactic Federation and of Samus. And there's one very key aspect that happened in Metroid Prime 3 Corruption in the beginning of the game. When you board the GFS ship, there's some conversations between the crewmates about the mission they're about to be going on. And let's go ahead and take a listen to exactly what they say here at the beginning of Metroid Prime 3. Take a look at this.
The pirate attacks must have the old man nervous. Looks like he's getting ready for a full-scale invasion.
No joke. Last time this many fighters were scrambled was during the Horus Rebellion.
That was some nasty business.
I have a feeling this will be worse. I'm sorry, I'm on duty. I can't talk right now.
So they were talking about the Horus Rebellion, which is basically a rebel attack against the Galactic Federation from their own citizens. And also in Metroid Prime 3, there is space pirate data logs that talk about how certain factions or people within the Galactic Federation have been secretly bribed by the space pirates and are working as spies who have infiltrated the Galactic Federation. And not only that, but after Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, Metroid Other M and Metroid Fusion in fact cast the Galactic Federation in a much darker place as far as what they are doing and what their goals are as an organization. They are much more interested in developing their own bioweapons or for other purposes that they have, including using things like the X-Parasites from Fusion and the Metroids themselves. In fact, all those things combined, all the research they've done, there was always some type of mysterious hidden secret that they were keeping from the public that was kind of apparent but also hidden as well from Samus during those games. But there was a conspiracy going on with the Galactic Federation to get certain bioweapons perhaps made or to use those creatures to their advantage to gain some type of power. That's still something, by the way, that is being explored in upcoming games like Metroid Dread, for example. I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about that and what happened at the end of Metroid Fusion with her relationship with the Galactic Federation. So even though the Galactic Federation is viewed upon as being positive and kind of like the heroes or the gatekeepers and saviors of the galaxy or keeping the peace, basically, really they have a much darker side to them and perhaps a bigger overarching plan that could possibly be evil and corrupt when it's all said and done. Getting back to Sylux, he may have been part of that Horus Rebellion that they were talking about in Metroid Prime 3, and he may have been a scientist as well, because in Metroid Prime Hunters, it talked about how he stole a lot of the scientific gear and armor that the Federation had, and the Galactic Federation considered some of those things that he took to be illegal weapons. However, since Sylux is seen in a humanoid form, all we've seen of him is inside his suit, which covers his organic appearance, which could mean that he is in fact a human who has turned against the Galactic Federation and going his own path, because quite possibly he was working for them to develop certain technologies, which leads to the theory that he himself could be a scientist of sorts who is also now a bounty hunter looking for his own power and his own revenge against the Galactic Federation, and quite possibly he's interested also in getting the power that Samus has because of his interest in the Metroids and with Samus's connection to the Metroids. That could very well lead into the beginnings of what causes the entire story of Metroid 2 Samus Returns to even have a reason to exist. And why do I say that? Well, it's because the reason of the mission for Samus in Metroid 2 Samus Returns is that she will go and destroy all the Metroids in existence and eradicate them. That is her mission, and the reason for that mission is very interesting, which connects, like I'm talking about, with Sylux and the Metroid. The reason that she's ordered to go kill all the Metroids is because, for some reason unknown, something happens from the time frame at the end of Metroid Prime 3 and then Federation Force. There is no lore or actual story points that highlight how much time passes between Federation Force and Metroid 2 Samus Returns, so it is unknown at this point. However, something big does definitely happen because the Galactic Federation deems that the Metroids are too dangerous to be kept alive and that they need to be destroyed for the safety of everyone in the galaxy. Basically, they're way too dangerous. So a very interesting theory that could come out of Sylux getting involved with this Metroid here from Federation Force and going into Metroid Prime 4 is that quite possibly, since maybe he is a scientist and he has this vendetta against the Galactic Federation, that he has a very, very big plan to take control of that portion of the galaxy or to gain power over the Galactic Federation by using whatever technology or secrets that he has hidden from Samus and the Galactic Federation to help build or mutate some type of gigantic, more powerful, evil Metroid that could give him more power and control over what he wants to accomplish to destroy the Galactic Federation or to even take control over them or to get revenge. That could very well be a key plot point as to why Sylux is so involved with Metroids and his revenge against the Galactic Federation. Perhaps they even killed his family back when he was younger in that Horus Rebellion, if he was involved in that. It seems like there's a lot of connections and coincidences here that do connect Sylux to that and the Galactic Federation, since that is the only recorded rebellion against the Galactic Federation, and as we've talked about, there's a lot of darkness and conspiracy that has infiltrated the Galactic Federation themselves. So Sylux could have a point, so to speak, as a evil villain as to what his motivation is. In his mind, of course, he's probably on the right path and he's the good guy. Most villains do, of course, see themselves as the good guy if they are after something they feel is noble. Samus's role in Metroid Prime 4 in this story, of course, most likely will be to stop Sylux and to bring peace, continue peace with the Galactic Federation and the galaxy. But I'm willing to bet that her emotional ties towards the Galactic Federation and to Sylux and his motivations could in fact be tested in this game, and then maybe we will get to see some moral weight or decisions made by Samus herself in Metroid Prime 4 that could weigh heavily on her decisions later on in these other Metroid games that we've seen, with Metroid Fusion for example, when she basically turns her back on the Galactic Federation and makes a choice that she feels is right and not that of the Galactic Federation. There could be some very interesting story arcs here that take place in Metroid Prime 4, which could lead, like we talked about, to a new trilogy. Now, what's very interesting about Samus is that in every single game for Metroid, Metroid Prime, all the Metroid games, Samus's suit is of utmost importance to her having power. Now, if you know the story of Samus and her origins, the Chozo, which were this bird-like alien race, took her and raised her into basically this superior type of humanoid that she became, and they infused her with their own DNA, the Chozo DNA. And so the blood of Chozo actually runs through her so she could actually survive the conditions of Zebes. And Samus is able to use the power suit and the other suits that she has by using a specially created body adaptation machine, which was provided by Grey Voice, which is a Chozo that raised her like he was her father. Now, in Metroid Prime 1 and Metroid Prime 3, the Chozo are very prominent in those games. In fact, in Metroid Prime 3, one is even named, and this is in the Skytown at the planet Elysia, where you actually can see a statue of a scientist Chozo by the name of Drin, who was actually described as one of the key scientists who created the power suit technology that Samus uses. The Chozo are basically the most important species for Samus because they are her family. So learning more about them in Metroid Prime 4 is a distinct possibility, especially since we have a lot of hints as to where this is going in the overall story for the Chozo. It would be interesting to see more information about the Chozo and even possibly Samus even talking or interacting with a Chozo of Metroid Prime 4, because she knows that they're still alive, and it's obvious now that they simply have left their home planet and they inhabited many different planets throughout the entire galaxy, which is what we're seeing in all these games, is that all these planets have quite a bit of Chozo influence. And since Metroid Prime 3, Metroid Prime Federation Force, and of course Metroid Prime 4 look like they're all going to be connected in some way with Sylux and the Chozo and Metroids, and then the connecting eventual influence as to why Samus returns in Metroid 2 happens, with the ordered destruction of the entire Metroid race, something big is going to happen in Metroid Prime 4, something to set off a new chain of events as to why it becoming such a dire emergency to kill every single last Metroid in existence. Since up through Metroid Prime 3 and Federation Force, the Metroids seem much more like a species that was being used for scientific research and experiments, never anything that was deemed to be something they should be destroying as an entire race of life forms. And remember also, the Chozo created the Metroids themselves as the creatures to help them destroy the X-Parasites. So the Metroids, the Chozo, Samus, Sylux, the X-Parasites, all these things are connected. There's a lot of story to tell in the Metroid Prime series. Because remember, after so much time has passed, we are now just getting started with a whole new slew of Metroid games.